Good morning, Divine Mercy Radio. As Cody said, I'm going to be conducting this interview for this hour. I specifically requested for it because a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago at this point, I forget exactly uh, when it happened, but Nathan and I were sitting, going about our normal daily tasks, and the mail came in, and there's a book there, just out of the blue. And we weren't really sure what to make of it. We got a letter and just not, we're looking it up, not too much information, a brand new author on the scene, and knew it was a Catholic book. And so Nathan tasked me, and he's like, well, read through it. And, if it's a good book and you think people can benefit from it, we'll have the author on the Care-a-thon. And so I read through it and I absolutely loved the book. It was amazing. So we reached out to her and she's here with us. So if you pull that mic a little bit closer to you there, and there you go. All right, perfect. All right. Yeah. So if you want to say your name for our listeners out there.
Yeah, I am Kristin Lyle, and I published The Defective here back in November.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm rifling through real quick to find the trivia question for hour. We're going to go ahead and start with that. It can be a little difficult to get through that. Just a second here. Sorry. Anyways, okay. Well, you know what? Let's just go ahead and start with the interview then. Oh, there we go. Perfect. That might help. Cody popped back into the studio. All right. So we're going to go ahead and do the first trivia question. We're going to go ahead and let Kristin read it for us. So you'll just read off the question and then the four possible answers, but not the actual answer, which will be listed below, and somebody will call in and they will receive it. 785-621-4110. Get that into your phone. 785-621-4110. All right, if you want to read that, go ahead.
All right, so the first trivia question is, during which war did Saint Pope John Paul II live? A, the Korean War. B, the Polish Civil Conflict. C, World War II. Or D, the Austrian-Czech War. Again, during which war did Saint Pope John Paul II live? A, the Korean War. B, the Polish Civil Conflict. C, World War II. Or D, the Austrian-Czech War.
Perfect. All right. Again, that number is 785-621-4110. All righty. I ended up finding what I was looking for. So now I have the interview questions. I was a little bit panicked there, but we're fine. We're going to roll right into it. And actually this hour, and actually, for throughout the rest of the Care-a-thon, Kristin was kind enough to bring up 40 books for us, and they're all signed, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So 40 signed books. So if you make a donation and you come up to receive your gift or just visit us at the station, we're going to go ahead and give those out if you would like one of those books. And I think after you hear this interview, you're definitely going to want one of those. So stay tuned, listen in, and we're going to get right into it. All righty. Now, the title of this book is The Defective, and let's just go ahead and start with an introduction. So Kristin Lyle is a dedicated wife and stay-at-home mom of 3 little girls. She enjoys spending her time cooking, gardening, caring for her family, and more recently, writing. Over the years, she's been blessed with health struggles and a loving God to carry her through them as he strengthened her. Last November, she published a book titled The Defective in hopes of planting seeds to awaken people's souls and turn their footsteps back towards Christ. Does that sound about right?
That is pretty spot on, yes.
All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and just start with the basics. Before we get into how you wrote the story, let's go a little bit over, what is it? So where does this story take place? What's the setting?
So the setting of this story is the future of our current world, kind of on the trajectory that we are unfortunately headed. It's in the United States. Some of the demographical cues of that in the book, it talks about she grows up in this town or the city called New Detroit. So it's a concept of, instead of us actually solving problems, we just rename it and rebrand it and tell everyone it's going to be fine. But that didn't work the first time for New Detroit. So now it's New Detroit.
Yeah.
They're really going to fix this time. So that's demographically, it takes place up in that area for the majority of it. The setting being in the future, I would like to say it's like way out in the future.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
again, the trajectory we were heading on, a lot of things have happened in the last 10 years that I never dreamed would be possible of coming to fruition. And I guess one of the biggest things to keep in mind with the context of this is they're living in a world where society has completely removed the knowledge of God.
Okay.
All writing, all references, destroyed every sacred everything that there was for the sake of freedom. I put that in quotes because that's what their idea of freedom is. I can do whatever I want and then I feel free. So they saw God as this restrictive thing that they didn't want controlling them. So the only way for them to live in this freedom is to eliminate God. Now, you can't destroy God, so they destroyed the earthly references of it. As you get into the book pretty quickly, you see it's absolute chaos and it's crumbling society and demise. And that's just kind of that resounding theme of that's where we would be without God.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, what a premise. We're always looking for more good Catholic literature, and something that was, I forget, I don't know. I know there's this band named Korn. I think it's kind of a heavy metal band, but one of the, and I don't necessarily listen to them, but there's a quote that I think is really perfect from that. And I think it's the bassist who's actually either Christian or Catholic.
Mhm.
And one thing he says is that we don't need more Christian music. We need more music that is Christian,
Yeah.
And so not necessarily like, and so when like you're writing a book, you want a good book, like think Lord of the Rings or something like that, right? Where it's not explicitly like Catholic, but you can read that, our Catholic faith is baked into that. And,
Exactly.
and now God is very present in here, right? But it's not like, that's not the, you don't lose anything in the book from it being kind of more like focusing on that part. And I think that can be a hard thing to do sometimes, you have The Chosen, another wonderful thing where it's like, you don't lose any production value because you're talking about faith things, and it's a good production. So, all right, so we got a little bit of the setting of the story then. So let's go more into how did this story even, happen in the first place? How did we get here? First time author, right?
Yeah.
Last November, so you're getting close to a year now that the book will be out, this November. So where did you first get the idea to write this story?
I was vacuuming. So I've got 3 little girls. At this point, I had 2. I hadn't had our third one yet.
Okay.
And if you have small kids, you vacuum every day, if not more than once a day. So I'm vacuuming, and I guess that's my quiet time.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the very beginning of the concept of the twins and the turmoil just kind of started playing in my head. And get done vacuuming, forget it because my little girls need this or this, and we're running and doing that. The next day, get the vacuum out and start vacuuming, and it picked up where it left off. And this continued for a week. And I got to the end of the week, and I was like, oh my gosh, this would make a great book. And then I just hear that voice, and it said, yeah, so write it. And I had never had the dream of being a writer. I wrote food safety plans, which have no dialogue, no core content, nothing.
Yeah.
I just write what's there. So it was kind of like, you have the wrong person for this job. So fast forward a little bit then, I got pregnant with our third daughter, and I had ulcerative colitis, autoimmune disease, for 11 years. I got my colon out last year, so now I can say I don't have it anymore, which is a huge blessing, and God saw me through all that. But so I have my third pregnancy. Pregnancies were very hard for me. With ulcerative colitis, there's a lot of bleeding involved. And so I'm really anemic, really sick, had to get iron infusions to hopefully keep the baby.
Yeah.
We were really getting worried about her. She was my main focus and
Yeah.
concern. So iron infusions ended up giving me a blood clot. It was just all of these things. So for the whole pregnancy, it was difficult. And then for the whole year after, with ulcerative colitis, once you start a flare with that, you just dig this hole that takes forever to get back out of, and steroids. And it took about a year. We had to switch medications. And finally, I got to kind of a plateau where I was able to function again, vacuuming in my kitchen, and it all came back.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you ready to do this? So I called my husband, because I hadn't even told him about that first saga. I said, hey, I feel like this is an actual calling at this point for it to come in a second time. What are your thoughts about me writing a Christian book? He said, yeah, go for it. So that's how it all started, I guess.
Awesome. Man, God just works in, wonderful ways, just, out of nowhere. He can plant that idea, and, you might even say a seed, which we'll get to that. But yeah. So started when did you first start? So published in November. So
yeah.
How long was when would you say you started writing, editing, proofreading, running it by people to see, is this even worth publishing at this moment,
Right. Yeah, because when you write something, obviously in your head, you're like, man, this is great. But then
Yeah.
it was really kind of scary to give it. And the beta readers that I had picked,
Yeah.
those are
Yes.
what they call the people that you choose. My mom, my aunts, so my best friends. So I felt pretty comfortable that they would be honest with me, because I didn't want
Yep.
just blanket feedback of, oh yeah, this is great. But so I started writing kind of right after that second introduction of, are you ready to do this? And my health had leveled out, and it's like, okay. So I joked that I was a nap time novelist, because I would only write during nap time. I didn't want to take time away from the girls. And what I had learned when I wrote food safety plans is I get so focused that if I get interrupted, I start getting frustrated, and that's not fair to them or healthy for anybody. So I just went to working on things during nap time, nighttime, early in the morning. So that's how it came into nap time. But I started writing about right after that, and I finished it. I took off the summer because my girls were out of school. So it would have been the following August. So it took about 9 months, and then minus the summer. So about probably 6-7 months to actually write the story. After that, started moving into the publishing part and doing research. I decided to go the self-publishing route. It made the most sense. Being a first-time writer, it's kind of hard to break into that, and then you've got to pay a lot of money to get people to be your agent, and I didn't do this for the money.
Yeah.
So, and not that it's not worth investing in, because we still did with editing and that, but it was just one of those things of I didn't see myself going into writing as a profession. So to do, potentially 10 grand up front was a little bit cost inhibitive. So there is a guy in Natoma that his name is Frank. He owns the cafe.
Okay.
And he's published some books. So I went and bounced ideas off of him, and he does self-publishing through Amazon. So that's what we did. But so after we wrote, I went through the whole publishing conundrum, decided I was going to self-publish. So then it's getting a cover made and doing the editing, kind of working through all that. And I went on a company called Readsy online, and they have a bunch of freelancers that are great, and they have them reviewed. You can send them 2 pages of your work, and then they send you back how they would edit it. So you're able to kind of see, is this the style I'm going for or not? Had a great experience on there with a lady named Dory. I would have liked to have, and it's all on God's time, I would have liked to have it published sooner, but I had mentioned last year, I got my colon out, and it was a 2-part surgery. I had to go up to Mayo Clinic for it in Rochester, Minnesota.
Okay.
So I had to gap the editing, trying to get all the proofing done, get it to her. She did first round of reviews, and then I had to be at a point where I was recovered enough I could go through everything. So the editing drew out longer than it typically would, just because of my health and everything with it. But the editing process It probably took 6 months, I would say. And it wasn't
Yeah.
intensive. It was, again, during nap time or when I wasn't napping too, because after
Yeah.
recovering from
Oh,
surgery
yeah.
like that, and I wanted to be in a good frame of mind and not exhausted.
Yeah.
But yeah, so finally got all that together and got on Amazon, got all the information put in there, had them send me the actual book. And then I had a couple of my beta readers reread to see if there's any final mistakes with editing and that. And funny, some of the first people that got this book, they've got some cute little edits for my 3-year-old in there because when I was doing some of the final touches, it would be in the morning and she would come down. So I'd, she needs juice. So I'd be like, okay, give me 1 second, go get her juice and come back and pick up where I thought I left off. There's page 80, I think 86, the word there's also like 3 or 4 D's after that. She just went D.
I was wondering how that got there.
That is, so I didn't find that. And neither did the beta readers with the final, because that happened during that final editing process.
Yeah.
So when I was reading this aloud to my 2 older girls, they wanted me to read it. So I edited out the curse words, some of the suggestive things that are in there.
Yes.
There's nothing gory or graphic, but just some things that my 10-year-old and 8-year-old don't need to start wondering about. So I'd edit it out and get to them and be like, Gail's really mad now. But I'm reading it and I stopped when I saw that. D.
Yeah.
It's like, so went through the whole book then to make sure there weren't other little gems hidden about, and got that all updated. So there's some, you have one of the copies that have the magic little 3-year-old edits in there as well. So
because I know there's another part where you use a little I think it's onomatopoeia maybe, but like, the noise, like it like you write out how the word sounds and the way they say it. And so like, and so I was like, oh, maybe it's one of those, but no, that's cool though. That's kind of, it's nice to know that story. That's fantastic. I got to break in here real quick. We do have a trivia winner. So during which world war did St. Pope John Paul II live? And the answer was World War II. Pope John Paul II came out of a very tumultuous time, with World War II and just so much conflict going on in Europe. Also with St. Maria Faustina, who is one of the patrons of this station. She helped give us the Divine Mercy image and that whole devotion. And then also my confirmation saint, St. Maximilian Kolbe, came out of, I believe they all lived or were born within like 100-mile radius of each other. Like it was like all came from like the same exact spot almost, and lived not quite at the same time, but like almost in succession from each other. Their lives were just like amazing saints from that area. Just fantastic. But Cindy Ling also donated $500, and with our matching funds, that becomes $1,000, just like that. So when you're giving, right, don't just think it's like, oh, I can only give $10, or oh, I can only do 50. What's the point? No, that's doubled because we have those matching funds. That 10 becomes 20, the 50 becomes 100. It's exponential growth, people. So call 785-621-4110. 785-621-4110 to get your pledges in. Help us stay on the air. We're quickly approaching $50,000 for this Care-a-thon, and we still got all of the afternoon, the evening, and all of tomorrow to hit that $125,000 mark. I've been impressed. This is my 3rd Care-a-thon that I'm working here at the station, and man, it's just so amazing the guests that we're able to get on here. So help us continue to do the good work that we're doing with Catholic radio by getting amazing stories like Kristin's out there with this. 785-621-4110. All right, back to the interview. Now, so we learned about, where the story is taking place, what it takes to kind of get, self-publishing, writing, editing, how, the story with coming to you, vacuuming, writing, just whenever you have the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to like character creation with the characters in the book, do you base those off of people that you've met before, like, or do they just come from like, you just pull like, oh, that'd be cool, like TV show characters, or how does character creation happen?
And that's what's Trying to think. I know I did not write this book because I don't know how to do that. And it wasn't until I got into the publishing part of it that I found out how I should have done things. But they were already done. So one of the examples, Reezy, I had mentioned that I signed up, and they'll send you, because publishing, I knew nothing about any of this. So they'll send you like a week-long daily email that has little snippets from beginning to end of how to write a book to publishing and marketing. Well, I was interested in the publishing and marketing part of it. So I signed up for it, and I did read every one. It was like a 5-minute read that you get in your email, just tips and tricks and information. And I learned so much of just knowing that I don't know how to do any of this. One of them was talking about if you're writing a novel, which that's what mine turned into when I got to that point. It's like, oh, it's like we're in the novel territory now. But they said, how you need to map out your characters and be very careful so that everything works and you have these dynamics that are going and you consistently carry that character's personality through it. And that's where I probably can't help with your question because I didn't do that. When this was writing, it was very inspired. I would just sit down and start typing the movie I saw in my head. And one of my friends had made a comment. She's like, man, this would make a great movie. I was like, yeah, I've already seen it. It's awesome. But yeah, so the different things that they would say and the conversations, it was like I was watching it for the first time too. And I know that sounds crazy. And I would say it's crazy if I didn't experience it because it just, there would be turns in the story and I would just start crying. It's like, I did not see that coming, but my fingers are the ones typing. And I prayed that, God, use me as your instrument in whatever capacity. I didn't think that was going to be as a typist, but I'm more than thrilled. More than thrilled in any capacity. That's
amazing. All right. So we kind of got the background about how the story came to be. So let's get into the story itself. So new Detroit, up north, learning about how, instead of trying to fix things, we just try to make something new instead of like fixing the actual problem. So, let's kind of go over maybe, we don't want to give away the story, but what, the overall plot kind of, let's just walk through the story, just, maybe our main character, where she's been, she mentioned twins, how Christ has been eliminated from the world in a, at least they're trying to, and it seems like they're kind of successful at the beginning, so let's, where do we start? Where do we start off at the, page 1, where are we?
So page 1, the first chapter is a really cool reflection of what's to come. And it shows she's still in this point of turmoil of, she doesn't know what she's doing. She is struggling. It's hard, but she feels the peace with it. So she knows that this is right, even though it's not easy. And she even talks about, there's some days that are hard and there's some days that are impossible. And you would rather stay in this rut because it's predictable. It might not be great. Your life might be terrible. You might be going and diving into those same sins, but you want to stay there because it's comfortable. Because if you leave that rut, you don't know what's going to happen. So that's kind of where she's at in the beginning. From there, it breaks into the second chapter then, and it starts explaining where they're at in society. It doesn't explain how they got there, but just this is what we have now. So again, the biggest thing to remember is that God, it's not that he's not present, it's they're not letting him be. And it's the upper people in society and the government that made these decisions that this would be better for everybody, right? This is what we all need. And then enacting on that, and then everyone's left with the aftermath. So I guess just to give some of the beginning, they were dealing with overpopulation of the world. So these world governments get together and they're going to solve the problem. And they decide that instead of doing the right thing and the hard thing of finding solutions, we're just going to sterilize every woman after they have one child so that we're going to decrease how much we're adding to the population. So slowly we're going to level out. After that, they realize that this plan probably isn't going to be fast enough. So they call it the PNA, the Population Neutralization Act. So they decide they're going to start retiring people, but they're just coding it as that. It's just retiring people. What it is assisted suicide.
Yeah.
But they're explaining this to the children in the grade school. So it would be the main character, Gail, her mom. And they're playing this off as how wonderful this is. And look, these people, they are, they're going to be retired and it's better for everybody, right? Because they're just using more resources than they can provide. And that's really not what we're going for. But again, it just shows how much they had isolated themselves from God's will. And it was what they wanted. And they were trying to make things work in their own parameters, which weren't working. So they have all this in place, the world governments, and they're going to start enacting it. But something changes. And all of a sudden, fertility rates just plummet. And people aren't able to get pregnant. So now they're freaking out because we have the opposite problem. They do a bunch of tests and try to research, and they can't figure out at all what caused this. On top of that, the babies that are being conceived and being born have this beautiful mark on them that is the shape of a cross, which nobody knows what it is because they've eliminated Christ, and they don't know that that is our mark of salvation. And the upper government, they know what's going on because they are the ones that have concealed all of this. And they see this and they are afraid. Because it's like, what do we do now?
Mm-hmm.
Because these are the only kids being born, but we don't want this. So where are we left with here? So that's when they decide they're going to divide society into what they call defective. If you have this mark, you are now defective. If you don't have this mark, you are non-defective, and you get to go live in a non-defective ward, high society, because you are worth investing in. So that's in the book. It explains, parents would go to great lengths because they're starving. Their families are starving, and they would try to conceal their child's defect. That's what it's referred to so much in this is, this is a bad thing. You're defective. There's something wrong with you. You aren't worth bringing into our society where everything is roses. So from there, giving that backstory, the government wanted non-defective twins. They had a high value for that. So they were actually putting out monetary rewards, which would be very appealing to anyone living in the non-defective wards of, hey, we're going to give you money if you snitch on these people, or if you see non-defective kids, these things, because we want to extract them, study them, utilize them, build our high society here. So Gail's mom, she's single mom. The father of her children was murdered. So she's left with the aftermath. And they had started developing technology because if you were pregnant, they wanted that because the fertility rates were so low. But they wanted to monitor your pregnancy, make sure you were getting the right nutrition. And then they were also developing technology to look in the womb and see, is there a defect mark here? Because if there was, they didn't want that pregnancy to come to fruition. They wanted to terminate it, try again, because that's what they had desensitized everyone to. This isn't a baby, it's just a bunch of cells. So she didn't want that because this was the only thing of the man that she loved she had left. She didn't care if it was defective or not. She wanted her baby. So she has her child outside of a hospital and has to conceal the pregnancy. Then she has twins. And in the beginning of the book, she thinks that they're non-defective twins. So she is horrified because she can hide one kid. She can't hide them both and do it by herself. So she befriends this woman up the street, older lady, and she helps her out. And what she decides is, I only have to hide one of them. They're identical twins, so I can take them out and do this. But she has to fabricate a defect mark on them so that there's not that, aha, here's a kid that doesn't have the sign of the cross, which they call it the defect mark, and get them turned in. So that's the backstory for the beginning of her difficulties, I guess.
Wow, that's amazing. What a premise. It is crazy too. Like you say, you want this to be set in the far future, but we can see some of this in our lives today, especially with the problem with abortion. And if I'm not mistaken, Canada legalized euthanasia, like to to a huge degree. Like just crazy stuff, and like you say, I know there's another book called The Giver, where something similar. I don't know if you've read that book or not, but
I've seen the movie.
okay, yeah. And so they kind of have a same thing. I don't think they call it retirement, but it's a very and just the value of life. Life is very valuable, and when you don't have God and you don't have Jesus, you lose the respect for life. And I think your book does a beautiful job of illustrating that, where you have the defective who just get pushed to the side. Nobody wants anything to do with them. And then you get the other people who, get to live in luxury, and man, yeah, that's amazing. So the defect is a cross, but they don't know that. And so they're trying to, hide that. So now, let's get a little bit more into. So we have the two main characters, the two twins. We have Gail, and then I think Abby is. And then when they go out, they're called
Abigail.
Abigail, yeah. So they're going to school, and there's a little play now. Siblings fight, and so do you have any siblings that you were pulling from, like arguments with that, or like even if you've seen your daughters, struggle with each other a little bit in that? Where did you pull, like, because there's a little bit of button heads, in all families. So do you have any personal experience that you were drawing from with that?
I've got 3 brothers. 2 of them were older than me. There was a gap in between my 2 oldest brothers, and then there's about 4 or 5 years, and then me and my younger brother, Nolan. And me and Nolan, we fought. I was probably the antagonist mostly in it, being the older sister. He's just, and we get along so good now. I'm just so blessed. I get along great with all of my brothers. But yeah, I think there was definitely the ability to fabricate that with the tension of siblings. And like you said, I've got 3 girls, so there's definitely a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, with the defects in the story, because not, people start appearing with it. So by the time we meet Gail and Abby and their mother, does everyone have a defect, or is it still only some people actually have the defects?
So it would be basically Gail and Abby's generation.
Okay.
The babies that were born in that generation.
Yeah.
That were born with this defect then. And in the book, it explains some of them aren't born with a defect.
Okay.
And they develop one later the marking.
Yeah.
And then there's other ones that they claim don't have the defect, or what Gail has as well, is a defect of the mind. And it's so poetically sad how it plays on that of like, these are bad things. It's defects. It's the defect of the mind. But Gail is graced with this beautiful gift. And I wish that I could have it, because she can see the health of people's souls on their outside.
Wow.
So the sins, whenever people commit sins, and that their color starts to fade away to gray. So it's their soul is slowly dying. If they suffer from vices, gossiping, and that, the person will appear with giant lips or a huge ear. One of the first people that she meets after she's able to go out with her mom when she's big enough is this man with a wolf face. Just the different ways that different vices creep in, and that's what they take on, the physical appearance of what their soul is suffering from. And she's able to see that. But from the beginning, she's told, you need to conceal this, because this is bad. This is not okay. And her mom, bless her heart, is like, what is wrong with my kid? And because she would just start talking about these different things that she saw. And I mean, it's just, and she knew the turmoil she was causing her mother, because she's like, yeah, sometimes it makes her, most of the time she doesn't say anything, but she just sighs a lot, or she'll go off and like kind of cry a little bit. It just, but if you think about the struggle as a parent, and you don't know that base with God or any of this, but her mom was inherently good. You can get that too. She was trying to teach her girls to be good, even without knowing the knowledge of God and the rules. She was drawn to that light.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to break in here now. We're at 9:35, so a little over halfway through this 9 o'clock hour. We're going to go ahead and do the second trivia question. Going to go ahead and have Kristin read it again for us. She did an amazing job on the first one, so we'll have her do it again.
All right, second trivia question. Who did Simeon say, "A sword will pierce your heart" to? A, Mary, B, Elizabeth, C, Jesus, or D, King Herod? Again, that question. Who did Simeon say, "A sword will pierce your heart" to? A is Mary, B is Elizabeth, C is Jesus, and D is King Herod.
All righty, and that number is 785-621-4110. 785-621-4110. Get your calls in. Go ahead and answer that trivia question. If you answer it correctly and you're the first caller, sometimes people are really quick with it, but if you can get that answer, your name is going to be entered into a drawing at the end of the day for a $50 gift card to Messenger Catholic Bookstore. Wonderful. Jerome, we love him. We got some amazing coffee up here from him today. Cody won't drink it. Just kidding. No, but it's amazing. We went out there to buy some special coffee from them just to celebrate the Care-a-thon. You know, we want to go all out for our guests and volunteers that are up here today. So I didn't mean to call Cody out like that. He's out listening right now. Actually, I think he's in my office taking phone calls. So if you call in, you might get Cody. So go ahead and get your pledges in today. Get a chance to talk to the real host of the Care-a-thon. 785-621-4110. Help us hit that $125,000 mark. We're getting there. We're a little over, I want to say we're almost a third of the way there. A little over a third of the way there. Got 2 days left. Got some matching funds too. I think Cody will come in with that number at the end of this hour when he starts our last hour for this morning. So again, that number, or go to dvmercy.com. Plenty of stuff on there for you to check out as well. And, you know, come up here, 108 East 12th Street here in Hays, Kansas. Come and get your book signed by Kristin herself. I haven't seen any of you walk through my window that I can see out into our lobby yet, but come up and get that book. Well worth the read. We're going to keep diving into it so you get a better idea of what we're looking at. All right. Back to the interview. So we've been through the, you know, the beginning setting and all that. You know, where should we go from here? So we learn about, you know, the defects and, you know, society kind of not crumbling a little bit, you know, worries with fertility, people, you know, being born with these defects of the mind, you know, a gift really that, you know, Gail, our main character, is told is a defect and that she's weird. You know, and it's a little weird, but it's a gift, you know, and how many, you know, children, I mean, I didn't have this personally happen to me when I was young, but I had classmates who, you know, were smarter than some of us, and they'd be in these special programs like Spark or something like that, you know, and sometimes they'd be treated differently, you know, and their intelligence or their artistic abilities, you know, they didn't see them as a gift because they were treated differently for that. And I think that it is a gift, and we need to see that, you know, we're all given gifts from God to, you know, glorify him. So they're being raised in secret. They're identical twins, so they can go out with each other. So how does Gail and Abby, our two twins and our sisters, how do they differ personality wise?
They are polar opposites.
Okay.
Gail having that inherent defect and always thinking that there's something wrong with me. She was spiteful that Abby didn't have a defect. And Abby was spiteful that they have to conceal who they are because she doesn't have a defect, but Gail does. So there's that internal tension to start with. Gail is a lot more introverted and would like to just stay home. She hates going out. She's happy with the reading. She's very good at math and school. Abby, not so much. She loves the social life. She loves the friends. She loves the idea. It talks about one time, you know, she loved going out and looking at the posters when she was shopping with her mom and seeing these people in high society and the non-defective wards. And it's like, that's who she wanted to be. She dreamed and wanted that with every ounce of her being, but her sister was what was holding her back. So that's their conflict. They butt heads constantly. yeah, I guess it's not really a spoiler. Abby, so they go to school every other day. They switch on and off. And Abby struggles to keep up with Gail academically. So her mom really drills her, and you've got to get this because it's only going to get harder as we move up.
Yeah.
Gail hates the social aspect and talking to these friends. And she's very awkward then because that's something that's really hard to fake. Whereas Abby it's easy for her. So Abby goes as far as telling all of her friends that she has a weird disease, that every other day she's this weird person and you should stay away from her because you might catch it. So Gail eventually was very happy about that because they left her alone, but so hurt and rejected again, on top of already feeling that of my sister would cut me that deep and take away anything that I had. Like, I'm ruining her life, so she's just going to completely exclude me from it. So,
man, that's tough. I mean, you're already in a tough spot as it is with your family, and then your siblings aren't getting along, and then the stress on the mother too. Just has to be in. I mean, it's hard enough being a parent, but when you're dealing with two siblings that are not getting along, trying to hide them from the world, not fantastic. So, all right, so they're going to school. And I think, we're getting all that backstory, and we're down to our last about 20 minutes. So, we don't want to go too fast,
right.
but where do we, what kicks off like most of the action, to me, kind of in a little bit, you read through that first part, we talk about the hidden years of Jesus's life, and we kind of, at least I saw it. We almost kind of get that in the book a little bit, where you got this, something happened to them. You speed forward to, and so there's a little bit of, that hidden life there. But what happens to like kick off the rest of the book?
So I joke that it kind of starts, and that's not that the book's not good, but it's building and building. And you get all this information,
which is important. Yeah.
And then like in the middle of the book, it's like, that's where it starts. Like that is where it's like this, bam.
Yeah.
So from where we were, Gail goes through some really traumatic stuff. Her and her sister are separated. I don't want to give too much of the content there. But she decides she ends up going out on her own and bands with another group of young, undefective, young adults in their teens. And they're all lost and they're all just trying to survive. So they're making a bunch of very terrible decisions, but to them, this is normal. They don't have the beautiful gifts of God's parameters for us to stay in. They don't have parents. They don't have anything because they're not wanted. They're defective. So they are lying, cheating, stealing, eventually killing whatever they can to survive and get what they want, basically. Like I said, whole bunch of bad decisions. So they go down this snowball trail, and then, like you say, it speeds forward to her kind of waking up to this. She's in the middle of a terrible decision and gets out of there, and she's real bad, and she's running, and I'll just say has a wake-up call at that point. There's a pretty funny event in it. But she gets knocked out, and when she wakes up in her consciousness, she is in this meadow.
Okay.
And I guess I skipped the part about the
seed.
We did. That's kind of a crucial. That's
let's track back to that. Then let's track back to that. So I'd mentioned planting seeds before. It's kind of a hint to what's going to happen. So let's go back to now. This is in her childhood, right? So what's this whole the meadow? Where the meadow comes from? Because the beginning of the story starts in the meadow. Doesn't it?
She's in her meadow reflecting.
Yeah. Okay. So when do we first see the meadow? When she's a child. So
she gets this ominous seed that has her name on it, and it's just her name. It's just Gail. Well, everyone only knows she's Abigail, but she's the only one that can see that. That's part of her gift too, and she gets it from this man in glowing white. So she's super confused because everyone she sees is covered in gray spots or splotches in these defects.
Yeah,
and she's this little girl, and it's like, oh my gosh, he must be so rich because his clothes are so clean and white. But he gives her the seed, and he says, only you can let this grow. I can give it to you, plant it, but only you can let this grow. And he's just giving her just gentle encouragement of, you got this. So after one of her really big traumatic events as a child, she wakes up in her sleep, I guess.
Yeah.
But she falls asleep and she wakes up and she's in this beautiful green meadow and there's flowers and it's so bright and beautiful and calming. And she's really sad because of what she had just gone through. And she's there, and this man that gave her the seed, his name's Sebastian, and he's there too. And he said, it's time to plant it now. And it's like, this is all I have left. This is the only thing I have left.
Yeah.
He said, okay, so let's let it grow. So she plants it, and, you know, am I ever going to see you again? And he's like, in time, you will. And she just falls asleep crying again and wakes up, and she's where she was when she fell asleep, and
Yeah.
super confused. And it's like, well, that was a weird dream.
Yeah.
And she rubs her eyes and there's dirt on her fingers.
Oh.
And it's like, that couldn't have been real.
Yeah.
There's no way that was real. That was a dream. So that kind of leads into that alluring part of, what is this
Okay.
going on? So then fast forward to her really poor decisions. She gets knocked out and she wakes up back in this meadow. So this meadow is, and it's a Christian fantasy fiction. This is where the fantasy comes in, because it's not just a subconscious journey. When she leaves her meadow, her hands are covered in dirt and thorns, and the work that she's done is real. So she wakes up and she's in a horrific meadow. The fence that was around the perimeter is all broken and crumbled, and there's weeds everywhere and these big thorny trees, and it's atrocious.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is this place? So then working through some of the other people, Sebastian's there at different points in time too, but she starts trying to pull these weeds. One of them actually poked her, and she got mad. So she reaches down to pull it. And she goes into a flashback of a sin that she had committed. And it's like, what was that? So what's beautiful is once she's able, because she can't pull all the weeds all at once, just like they're a embodiment of her sin. Each time that an individual sins, a weed pops up in their meadow, and it's got to be reconciled.
Yeah.
So she's going through and she's going to have to pull all of these weeds that she put there. She's the only one doing this to herself. That's the beauty of it. So this is God still calling to her and giving her that conscience back again that she is completely pushed under. So she's pulling these weeds, and once she's able to pull a weed finally, it just dissipates into golden light, and this breeze comes and carries it away. And she's still super confused and skeptical and like, what just happened? This is ridiculous. But the more that she pulls, the better she feels inside, because those sins are, unbeknownst to her, those sins are being forgiven. And it has to walk her through on a childhood stage of understanding, because a lot of them, like when she got to the sin of cussing, she had no idea that was even bad.
Yeah.
So at that point, you know, she's watching this flashback and saying, why am I watching this? This is dumb. This has no actual tangibility. There's nothing wrong here so then it dives deeper. It's like, okay, let's try this approach. And then she's able to see the pain that she is doing to herself and to others.
Yeah.
And how that's not what we were designed to do or be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only at that point when she's able to feel remorse for it that she's able to pull the weed and move on. And in her conscious life, when she wakes up, then she's got thorns and blood and dirt on her hands, and she continues to sin and make bad decisions. We all do. We all fall. But God continues to give us that opportunity to get back up again. And he picks us back up. So it's just this beautiful transformation of her. She didn't want to change at first. She did not want to. And that's very clear in it, because it's like, why would I do this? This is ridiculous. Well, Sebastian's her spiritual leader with all of this. And he gives her a lot of those truths that our society does not want to acknowledge. There is truth in this world still, not just whatever I want to be true. There are hard, faceted truths that, I mean, God, it doesn't matter if you don't want to believe in him, just like their society didn't, that doesn't mean he's not there.
Amazing. Yeah. Gonna break back in here real quick. I see we don't have a trivia winner yet. So I'm going to read it again real quick. Who did Simeon say to, a sword will pierce your heart? A sword will pierce your heart. This comes from the presentation in the temple. You can find that in the gospel. Was it Mary, Elizabeth, Jesus, or King Herod? Who did Simeon say a sword will pierce your heart to? Oh, I hear a phone ringing. Somebody must have gotten it. That number is 785-621-4110. 785-621-4110. Call and answer that trivia question. Get a free book donated by Kristin Lyle. Amazing book. Please come up and grab it. I'm probably going to read it again this weekend. I'm getting flashbacks to reading it. Man, it was fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and set that trivia to the side because I think we have a winner that'll be announced here soon. I want to say thank you to the St. Nicholas Knights of Columbus for $250. And that $250 becomes $500 with our matching funds. Just like that. Magic. Amazing. Thank you to our donors for providing those matching funds. We had a $10,000 donor add to our matching funds this morning. And so all that work that we did to get our initial 20 down, just bang, right back. And so we got to work down to get that to zero so that we can use all those matching funds to profit and give glory to God. All right, we're down to about our last 5 to 10 minutes for our interview. And, there's still so much to cut. It's hard. It's hard because you don't want to give too much away, but you also want to because you want to get the message out. But I think, Paul Krause is going to be our trivia winner. Who did Simeon say a sword will pierce your heart to? That's going to be Mary. He said that to Mary, and that's part of the 7 sorrows of Mary. Beautiful devotion, and actually the Immaculate Heart of Mary sisters here in Hayes are very devoted to that cause. Yesterday they were on the radio and they were talking about how on Holy Saturday they actually have a huge devotion to the 7 sorrows, and they're just amazing too. But yeah, give that a praying I believe it's the Joyful Mysteries of the Rosaries where you'll find the presentation. So, all right, 5 more minutes. Let's get back into here. Going back to the pulling the weeds and it disappear out in the cussing part too, where she doesn't know. There's a really funny scene, and I don't want to give it away, but she's pulling the weeds, and like you said, they're poke her, and so they poke her, and she cusses, and out of the corner of her eye, she sees another weed pop up, and she's like, then she cusses again, and another one, and she's like, just frustrated because it's like, she's been, like you said earlier, in that rut. You're just in that rut, and you don't want to leave it, and it's hard to step out of it and blaze a new path. So let's go ahead. So we spend quite a lot of time in the meadow, and there's Sebastian, and is it just her meadow? Is she the only one with a meadow, or how does that all work?
So everyone inherently has a meadow, and it's got to be that desire to go there, the intrigueness, the calling. And that's where God was calling these people back with the defect mark and claiming us and saying, you are still mine. Regardless of if you discredit me, I still want you. You are still mine. So with the meadow, then these seeds that's God's way of still penetrating the world, planting seeds, spreading seeds. So the people that get a seed, as they start progressing and growing in their own spirituality through God, they start becoming shepherds. The seed that they planted sprouts and grows into a tree, and then that starts producing seeds. And they are called to go out into the world and spread God's word and spread these seeds. So Gail gets to that point and is like, what is this? This is ridiculous. But so she starts spreading seeds. So then it starts that journey over. It's a ripple effect for everybody that they have that opportunity. And it would be very intriguing to get this seed. And it's, if you get the book, there's a picture of it on the back. It's actually like this heart-shaped seed that just sprouts up into love. But so they slowly just continue to spread these seeds. And as they grow in their faith, their tree matures to a point where they can start spreading. So it's that ripple effect.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, going back to, if you were listening yesterday, we were talking to the Immaculate Heart of Mary sisters. Man, I'm pulling so much for them today. But we're talking about Mary. Mary would receive so much grace, but she also gave so much. And so we all have a meadow, but we're called to also go out and, like you said, planting seeds. I think that's such a beautiful way to view that. Is like, we got to go out when our seed has grown into a tree and we're flourishing with God. We have to go out and help other people also flourish with God. Okay, so Gail receives her seed at a young age. She grows her tree. It gets into shambles, is ugly looking, but then she starts to build it back, and then she's giving seeds. Is there any? And Sebastian visits her in the meadow. Can just anybody visit her in the meadow, or we won't spoil anything, obviously, but is there anyone else that visits her? Like, are there angels that visit her in the meadow, or who also visits her there?
Yeah, she's also from the very beginning, this little spunky girl that in the beginning she does not like, because her name's Kaya. She's a child. She's a beautiful, innocent little child that just has such an upbeat personality, and she's just always happy, no matter how mean Gail is, because Gail does not like her in the beginning. Gail, growing up in a world where there's no other kids really younger than she is, it's like, I have no use for this thing, basically, and she's just an annoyance and a frustration, and she's making it so much harder in Gail's mind. So they go through a lot, and you start to see, as Gail starts working through her meadow and start trying to be a better person. She had to try so hard and fail, but she just kept getting up and trying, because she wanted that. She knew she could feel the change, and she knew how real that was. So her heart starts softening towards Kaya as well. And they have their own so many little side journeys together. And Kaya is very, very smart as far and knowing about God, and help giving her information and more little just seeds and tidbits to think about and digest. And Gail doesn't always want to hear them, but she is a huge help for her spiritual development as well.
Is she an angel? Is she living? Is she someone else? I don't know. You're going to have to read and find out. And I recommend it, because it's, I really did love reading about that relationship between the two of them. It was so, it's funny too, because as Catholics, we're called to be, growing in relationship with God. And so it was kind of funny, because we were out in the lobby talking about how we were going to do this interview before we got on there. I was like, man, sometimes you read and you're like, how don't you get it yet? And then it's like, well, look at yourself, buddy. How much in your own life is it like, well, if you would just do this, do what God is calling you to do, you'd probably be a lot happier. And it's like, well, I don't want to do that. And it's like, well, now you know how Gail feels.
Exactly. And the reflection, it's so cool to hear all the different perspectives of how this book speaks to each person. One of them is, they'll talk about, I started thinking about, what are the weeds in my meadow? What is it that I am doing? Whether it's small weeds, because there's a very stark differentiation of the small weeds and the big weeds.
Yes.
And that is your mortal and your venial sin. Both of them are very negatively impactful to your soul, to the overall meadow. But there's the ones that you cross that line, and they're a lot harder, and they have more of a hold on you, and they're gnarly. So it's cool that people read this and start doing that internal contemplation of, like you said, like, what am I doing? And well, that's how she feels.
Yep. So. Well, and especially, because everybody struggles with, different sins and different things. So, something that I struggle with, you don't struggle with, and vice versa. So when we're looking at that, just different things. So awesome. Well, I see we're at 9:59, so we're going to have to wrap up there. But man, folks, come down to the station, please, and grab a book. Well worth the read. I enjoyed it so much. Kristin, Lyle, thank you so much for coming on the air and driving down here. She's signed. All the books are signed, right? We have 40 books to give away. Actually, sorry, 30. I think we're down to 38, because I saw 2 of them go before we even walked out here. So we got 38 books down here. Call in, get your pledges in. I'm hearing the phone rings. And Piper, thank you for $25. That's actually $50. And Corey and Pam Munch pledged $350, which, if I do my math right, I believe is going to be $700 $100 because of those wonderful matching funds that we have. Kristin, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Awesome. All righty, folks, you're listening to the 2025 Spring Care-a-thon. Pray, hope, and don't worry. And, we end up seeing that in that book, actually, where our main character, Gail, begins to learn how to pray, and she actually has hope re-enter her life. And, she's going through all this struggle, but she starts to not worry at the end of it. And actually, there's a beautiful part where she just accepts God and the plan that he has for her life, and she just runs with it, and it's very beautiful. So, all right, we're listening to 101.7 KJDM Lindsborg, Salina, 105.7 KMDG Hayes, 88.1 KRTT Great Bend, 88.1 KVDM Hayes, 89.1 KGOH Colby, and 107.3 K297 AI Hill City. I'm going to hand it back over to Cody, the professional in the office. Hopefully he's not too mad at me about the comments I made earlier, but we're going to hand it right back over to him.